I'm going to introduce, is it Dan or Daniel?
Either way is fine.
Yes,
But it's usually Daniel if I'm getting told off. So
no, no, that's fair enough. People who I don't know, I'll always say Daniel, especially in the business world, because then when they phone me up, if they say, "Oh, can I speak to Daniel?" I know that I don't know them very well.
oh yeah.
There's my little code. And I wanted to put you, mate, because like I was saying earlier, like I follow you on LinkedIn, and you're one of these. You're so genuine about talking about mental health and your personal life and all this kind of stuff. And I just want to pull you, mate, because I'm hoping some of our followers might learn something from you. What they might be able to take a snippet and walk away from, so to speak. Have that made sense? Or have I just
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
cool. So tell us about yourself, mate.
So I'm 20 and for the last, well, for about 4 years, I've noticeably struggled with my mental health. And then when I was about 18, it kind of just between the ages of 16 and 18, it kind of collapsed. And I was I kind of lost myself. So I kind of had to build myself back up again. And that's how I got into writing, really, and how I got into poetry and expressing myself, really.
Yeah. It must be hard being a poet though, because like no one's a poet anymore, are they?
It does get kind of labeled as fairly old-fashioned, but
Yeah,
I do like to think that my poetry kind of brings it into the modern kind of sphere, if you like,
yeah,
because it's obviously talking about mental health, which is quite a current topic.
yeah,
Um, and it's not kind of the typical sonnets and things like that that people associate with poetry. So
yeah. So would you say for you poetry, it's a different world for me, mate, but would you say poetry's, I don't want to say healed you because it's always an ongoing journey, but would you say poetry helps out your mental health then?
yes, it does, because I first started writing poetry unconsciously when I was about 13, and it was
Right.
just to write down how I was feeling, and I
Yeah.
realized quite a lot of it was quite dark.
Well, okay.
um, so I kind of put it aside until I was about 18 and then put it together into my books and bits and bobs. So it definitely has been part of the kind of catharsis side of mental health, really. So
So did you kick that back in once you said, because the first person was said the mental health collapsed.
yes.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Obviously, you're an author, so you're going to be good with your words. But claps, I've never heard. It must be a couple of hundred videos, I think now, 150 to 200 videos with all different bloke shapes and sizes and a couple of women. No one's ever used the term claps. Why do you use that word? I'm just being nosy, Matt. I'm putting you on the spot.
That's all right. So when I was about 16, I was obviously doing my GCSEs and stuff, and I was stressed a lot of the time because I wanted to obviously achieve what I was capable of achieving. Um, and I was on edge quite a lot of the time, and I was literally holding it together.
Yeah,
And then after that, it kind of got to the phase of collapsing because I just didn't know what to do with myself because I'd done my GCSEs. I'd got in a panic during the exams and then not done as well as I should have done.
yeah.
So it kind of backfired on me, and then it kind of all just came out and collapsed. So that's how the collapsing kind of comes around, really.
Do you think that's just because you put is that because you put so much pressure on yourself? Would you say, or
I do put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
yeah? Does it? Well, it's not always. I don't think being perfectionist is always a bad thing. I think it goes into it can bounce it over that line of imposter and self-worth.
Yes, definitely. In small doses, it's quite useful because it motivates you. It
Yeah,
gives you a drive. Um, Obviously helps you achieve what you can achieve, but then it can become quite debilitating when the anxiety kind of takes over, becomes more than what you actually are aiming to do.
how do you mean? So I think it's me, not you. How do you mean?
So if you're aiming to, I don't know, I'll put it into a writing example. So if I was going to write 1,000 words today, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. My anxiety is slightly building, just to give me that drive.
Yeah.
And then it's got to midday and I've only written 10 words. So then my anxiety's spiking. And then at that point, I might just sit there and do nothing because I've got into that freeze state and that drive is no longer useful because it's overridden my motivation.
And
That
how?
makes sense?
No, no, it does. It's interesting. The amount of conversations I've had about mental health is just you've explained it perfectly.
Ah, thanks.
You know,
I
I
try
certainly
my best.
I feel like I'm in a therapy session, mate. If I'm honest with you. So the way, no, I think you've explained it really, really well. So, excuse my terminology. How do you snap yourself out of it?
How do I snap myself out of it? Um, it kind of depends what's going on in my life at the time and whether I'm anxious or whether I'm depressed or whether I'm anxious and depressed, which is a lovely combination. Um, I think for the most part, it's acknowledging that I'm feeling that way because quite often in the past, I'd kind of just keep it together as much as I
Yeah,
can and then ignore it and then collapse. So I acknowledge it. I still get annoyed that I feel that way because I know it's not really particularly doing me any favors.
yeah,
But I do allow myself to feel it much more than I used to. Um, so that eases some of the pressure off myself. And then I tend to write about it quite often in my blog posts if there's like a particular thing in my week or the last few weeks that has been really playing on my mind. So,
yeah,
like perfectionism, for example, I tend to write about it because I know that it will help me articulate my own feelings to myself
yeah.
as well as helping other people. So,
Wow. So how do you do? Because are you a self-publisher then? Are you or?
yes, I am. Yeah, self-published.
Oh, okay. Because that's something what would annoy me. I guess you don't have it at the moment, but say for example you start hitting the big time, and then you get a publisher who's like, "No, I want you to change this, that, and the other as well." But if in your head you've hit perfection, and they're like, "Actually, no, we want you to change this, that, and the other as well." How would you feel? How do we how would you
Um,
react to that?
I think that would be quite difficult, because, like you say, I've worked hard on the books, so they're as good as I can get them to be at the moment.
Yeah.
But then I think the support of a publisher would again take some of that perfectionism away because they're here to help me, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Well, no, it does. Yeah. So do you have anybody? I'll use myself as that. I can be a bit of a perfectionist, and so sometimes that stops me moving forwards.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
But then I have my wife where she's just like, Dan, just you got to nip this one in the bud, mate. You're going way too far. Do you
Yeah.
have it sounds like you can relate to that. Do you have anyone around you what's like, Daniel, stop?
Lots of friends from work in particular, because they're quite aware that I'm quite driven,
Yeah.
and quite perfectionistic, and they are quite open about their mental health because they know that I'm a writer and in the kind of mental health space, if you like.
Yeah.
So they seem to open up to me quite a bit more than I would expect them to, if that makes sense. Um, so we quite often have quite open discussions at work about different areas of mental health. And they keep an eye on me and I keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
And then obviously family and things like that. So
Oh, okay. Do you find you've turned into like the mental health guy in your area?
yes, because if I'm at an event or something, people tend to come up to me and ask me about my books and about my mental health, and then it kind of they start telling me a story of their mental health, which
Yeah.
is good. But then it's kind of difficult to manage because sometimes they open up so much
Oh
that
yeah.
you're not entirely sure they'd actually tell you that if you were someone else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But how do you offload on that? Because with MANUP, I see stories literally a few times a day now, and especially we hear a lot about. It's weird because as MANUP, we don't really talk about suicide
Uh-huh.
because we try to change minds early.
Yeah, do that prevention. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'd like to think we're very good at it, but unfortunately, we have nearly daily conversations and messages about people who are sadly no longer with us. But I'm now in therapy because of MANUP, like, so I've got a way to release and not keep absorbing that. I think I'm trying to say in a weird, long-winded way, so I apologise. How do you offload and not take on everyone else's burdens?
Um, it's a bit of a difficult one to pinpoint, but
It's hard. Yeah,
I almost kind of shut off my, I kind of section my emotions. So I've got the stuff that I'm dealing with, and
yeah,
that person has got their stuff.
yeah,
So it's their responsibility. As cruel that might sound, but it's just kind of separating that emotion so that I don't take it on and feel like I have to deal with it as such.
yeah. I think that's a good. I think that's a good art. I think that's a really good answer, and I think that's because when I started doing therapy, like there's a few conversations. I'm just like, I need to go for a walk. I'm just like, what I'm reading here is just absolutely horrendous. But there are those little times where I don't know. Who was the saying to? It was either to my therapist or someone else. I was like, do you know what? My biggest fear is becoming desensitized.
Yes, yeah.
I'm,
I
I'm
do
abs-
get that feeling actually.
yeah, and I'm absolutely terrified. I'm terrified about it. But actually, on the other hand, you kind of need to be desensitized because it'll destroy you.
Yeah, it would actually. If you took it all on too quickly, it would, yeah, there'd just be nothing left
Yeah.
to give, really.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's taken off. I think it's just that thing of offloading it or not letting it in that bit of your brain, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know where we're going with this. It seems to have taken a bit of a turn, this conversation, doesn't it? But that's why we don't script.
No, it makes sense, and it's all a good conversation to have, to be honest,
Oh,
because
no. Yeah, go on. No,
no,
sorry.
you go first.
No. You go first. Sorry, mate. I've got a habit of intro, so I apologize. No, carry on what we're saying. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say it's an important conversation to have in terms of being in the mental health space. That obviously you're there to kind of help people with their mental health in their various ways, but there's also that aspect of looking after your own mental health and kind of working out that balance between it not affecting other people in the
Yeah,
way that your mental health is affected.
yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think that's something else I see quite a lot is where somebody's come back, they've recovered, or they're in a place where they're very, very happy with their life, and then they want to start something. And they'll come up to me and like, oh, damn, I want to start a charity and all this. I'm like, if you haven't got the grounding around you and people and the network around you, don't.
Mm.
If I'm honest, and I'm not. I don't mean to sound like an arse. Just don't. Make sure you got your own house in order before you can help other people, because that's
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. I think so. So what's your day to day look like for you?
In terms of mental health or just everything?
Is it not all linked to the same thing?
Yes, it is pretty much all linked to the same. So I tend to not stress, but I have a general anxiety in the background
Yeah,
that I acknowledge, and I do kind of use it for my benefit. Um, so I use it to get me through the day. Really, it's a bit of a drive. It's a bit of enthusiasm, really, because I can, on the outside, I can come across as hardworking, which I am, but
yeah,
then that's the anxiety playing. Um, and then at the end of the day, for example, when I finish the day job and I'm doing some writing, there's kind of the more depression side of things. So, am I good enough? Am I kidding myself?
yeah.
um, am I just going through the motions? Am I really doing my best? Um, and quite often the answer is I am doing my best and I'm doing all that I can, really.
Yeah, no. So you sound quite similar to me, where if I've got it wrong, then I'll apologise straight away. I think I'm at a place in my life now where I'm probably going to continue having high functioning depression for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
and the BPD that won't bugger off. I just won't get. So now I'm like, well, I can keep moaning. I don't want to sound harsh, but I can keep moaning about it, or I can learn to live with it.
Yeah, I think to a certain point, there's only so much you can do to kind of get rid of it. And
Yeah,
then the rest of it is managing it and working out a way to use it for your benefit rather than for your detriment, really.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that for me, that's the blessing of BPDs. What BPD, once you're focused on something, that's it. You will get the result.
Yes.
And that the depression stuff. Thankfully, my depression doesn't really hit me that much these days, but I've still not found a plus moment of that one. There's nothing on that, but I'm like, okay, maybe sometimes you can have a good couple of days in bed, which is very, very rare, but I've not found a plus moment for anything good about depression yet.
I would say the only kind of benefit for me is that it's all grist to the mill for my writing. But aside from that, it's not particularly useful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So just before we draw to a close then, if someone's watching this, it's one of these where we kind of bounce on a few little topics really, but it's a natural conversation. But if somebody's watching this and they're triggered or affected, whatever buzzword you want to talk about, and they're like, "Oh bloody hell, that's me," well, what would you tell them to do? Or what would you do in that if it makes sense?
Um, so initially, I would perhaps do my own reading just to help me kind of regulate how I'm feeling and get a handle on what I'm feeling. So if I was anxious, for example, I would start reading about different types of anxiety and how it can be set off or triggered, um, just so that I've got the right words to explain it to other people.
Yeah,
And then in some fashion, I would explain it to somebody else and speak to somebody about it. And then a lot of it is kind of just sitting with yourself and letting yourself process it, really, and then taking any further necessary steps, really.
yeah, no, absolutely. So where do you tend to read?
So
Please don't say Dr. Google.
yeah,
You're a Dr. Googler, aren't you?
I do tend to Google a few bits, but then I obviously do take it with quite a bit of pinch of salt
I
and
think
kind of
that is the key, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. As long as I can get the words that I need to explain it to somebody else, then that's all right. And then I kind of link it up with my own how I'm feeling and kind of validate how I'm feeling before
Yeah,
Google tells me I'm doing something else
yeah.
or I'm feeling something else.
That's interesting. You say it. I've not yet. Again, you're a wise one. You really are. Is so you're feeling naff about whatever. Doesn't matter what it is.
Uh-huh.
And rather than you looking for a symptom or a cure, you're looking for other ways to explain it to other people.
Yeah, because if I can explain it to other people, then I can explain it to myself in a way.
You know damn well
Um,
that I'm going to cut this section out and reuse this all over social media. This little bit here because that's genius, mate. I've not heard anyone say that. I thought that's bloody
well,
clever.
we're full of nuggets here.
No, no, absolutely. That's my year's worth of content for MANUP sorted out, mate. But no, that's because we're quite anti Dr. Google's. Like, just don't do it because you can Google about you can Google about having an ingrown toenail. Next minute you've got leukemia and need a sex change.
Yeah.
But actually, yeah, googling stuff to find out how other people explain it. That's genius.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So I think our work here is done, mate. Really, isn't it? We've flown through that one, but that was an interesting one.
Yeah, because you can quickly lead yourself down a rabbit hole of I'm going to die in the next 5 seconds.
You know, exactly. Yeah, just don't do it. But yeah, it's just yeah, you blow me away with that. Actually, just find out how to explain it. I think that's genius. Absolutely well done to you, mate. But
Thank you.
let me hit that on record button thing. 1 second, mate.